Here with Ben Fawkes, who has the lowdown on betting action for college football's championship weekend. Ben, let's start things off in the SEC, where Georgia is a 5.5, 6-point favorite over Alabama. Both of these teams are coming off games where it sort of looked like potentially both were looking ahead to this game. Georgia wins by 8, but that game was very interesting early on. And then the Iron Bowl, pure chaos. Bama getting bailed out by a late Milroe to Bond touchdown. What is the action looking like on this one? Do we have the classic sharp versus square split in this one?
Yeah, this is a fascinating game from a betting perspective. You don't see Alabama as an underdog basically ever. They have played 193 games since 2010. They've been a favorite in 190 of those games. So only 3 games they've been underdogs. They've all been against Georgia, and this will be the 4th time since 2010 they've been an underdog, all against Georgia. I talked to one bookmaker, he said all one-way action so far on Georgia. This opened a little lower. The look-ahead line as well was a little lower. We've seen that go towards Georgia. Georgia -6 at some books, -5.5, -5 at other books. But I think right now people are betting on Georgia money line and Georgia to cover. At a certain point, we'll see some buyback. I think that's probably Alabama +6 or so, or if it potentially got higher. But right now, a lot of money going towards Georgia as they look to potentially have a back-to-back-to-back national championship run.
Friday night features the Pac-12 Championship game with Oregon as 9.5-point faves over Washington, who hasn't really looked great now in back-to-back weeks at Oregon State, and then last week in the Apple Cup. What are you seeing here?
Yeah, another really interesting game. Certainly these teams met earlier in the season and arguably the best college football regular season game this season. Washington at +9.5. There is a +10 out there as well. They're only the 3rd undefeated top 5 team since 2005 to be at least a touchdown underdog in their conference championship game. And the other two, a few years ago, we had Notre Dame and then Alabama back in 2008. Both of those teams got crushed by the favorites. So the historical trend, even though there's only 3 games, leans towards Oregon. And this is something we have seen a lot of public bettors as well get on Washington, which I think is interesting. We'll see if that gets back to 10 or not. But it is tough to go against Oregon. I think we're seeing a lot of Oregon first half as well, potentially in the Ducks get up big and then maybe let down late, don't necessarily cover that final number. But Oregon money line as well, a popular parlay play so far.
Here with Ben Fawkes at bfox22 on Twitter. Ben, Big Ten, another interesting one to me, and only because we've got the Iowa Hawkeyes, who fell ass backward into the championship game here, setting football back decades in the process, 21.5-point dogs against really a vastly superior in every way Michigan team. So I'm curious, is Iowa seeing any money or tickets, and what's happening with the total here?
So this is the least bet of the 5 major college football championship games this weekend. And I think that's just because there's not that much kind of enticement, right? Michigan, it seems like, is likely in no matter what. They're a far superior team to Iowa. If you watched a lot of Iowa games this year, you probably got some chores done because there wasn't a whole lot going on necessarily while you were watching. But despite historically low totals, Iowa games have been going under. They're 10-2 to the under this season. This total is 35, 34.5. Total's actually split in terms of betting. One sportsbook I talked to is going to need the over. One sportsbook, everybody is betting that. They're going to need the under. So public not really decided necessarily on that. It's varied a bit. In terms of the spread, it's pretty much all Michigan from the public. Michigan money lines are going to be in every single parlay this weekend. Looking at that as a free bingo square. And you can understand why. I think some people as well, same thing, the Oregon game, betting the first half, betting Michigan in the first half, figuring they get up big early. I don't really have to worry about what happens later on if Iowa gets a late field goal touchdown or whatever that is. But seemingly, this seems like Michigan's going to win big. It's just a question of how big.
Or safety, as Iowa seems to get frequently this season. But yes. Last one I want to talk about, ACC Championship game. Florida State, of course, without Jordan Travis, but 2.5-point faves for this one in Charlotte. Is anyone on the Seminoles here?
So surprisingly, the public is backing the Seminoles here under 3. There was some sharp action that took this off of 3, Louisville, and got us to Florida State minus 2.5. But one sportsbook I talked to, public, they have all over Florida State minus 2.5 and Florida State money line. I think assuming that obviously they're going to do everything they can to win this game, and then they should be in, one would think, a college football playoff if they do. It's a really interesting game. Obviously, a very different game without Jordan Travis in it. And one I think we're going to see again. Probably the public backing Florida State at under that field goal, and probably some resistance if we get back to 3 there from respected action.
So I'll put you on the spot here. We're going off script, but just peer into your crystal ball a little bit. Which 4 teams do you have going to the CFP?
I think it's probably tough to knock Georgia out no matter what. So I kind of view that Georgia is in. I think the same holds for Michigan in terms of that. So I think they're in no matter what. And then I think the Pac-12 Championship game is a de facto play-in game. I don't think Washington gets in if they lose because they've had so many close calls. And then Oregon, only lost by a field goal early on. So I think Oregon probably wins that game and gets in. And then I think that's the last spot, whether that's Florida State, whether that's Texas. Again, in my scenario, Alabama's losing, so they're not getting in. I think Florida State, if they win, they're in. If you're undefeated, regardless of what you are as a team right now, I think it would be I don't think, based on precedent, there has been an undefeated team that's been kept out, a Power 5 team of the college football playoff. I would be very surprised if they didn't get in, if they win. Now, if they lose, who knows? All bets are off. And then if Alabama beats Georgia, you got a whole lot of other potential debates that come in there. And that's why it'll be fun to watch all the games this weekend.
And last thing before I let you go here, I know we hopped on to talk mostly college football and conference championships, but I'll put you on the spot again. Has anything caught your eye in terms of action on the Week 13 NFL board?
Yeah, I think we always have. We've been lucky enough the last couple of weeks to get some premier games. There's been some ugly NFL games too, for sure. But the one this weekend with the 49ers and the Eagles is a really fascinating game, both on the field and from a betting perspective. And from a betting perspective, it's really interesting because the Eagles are 10-1, and they are a home underdog against a team with a worse record, the 49ers. That's only the 3rd time that that's happened since 2005. And the other 2 instances were basically teams resting their starting quarterback in week 17, back when there were only 16 games. So it's never been this case where the team that's 10-1 is starting their starting quarterback and has been an underdog. We saw this open at 49ers -1. Some places a pick, move all the way to 49ers -3. I think we're going to see the public, as they have right now, come in on the Eagles, especially getting 3 points. And we've seen these sharps basically bet that up to 3. I don't think they'll necessarily take that at 3. I think they like 49ers -1, -2, etc., getting that 2-3. But a really fascinating game from betting perspective, and one I'm really excited to watch. I would still lean the 49ers. I think they're the better overall team, which is also why odds makers have them as a higher rated team than the Eagles currently. But it should be a great game to watch on Sunday.
Ben Fawkes, great stuff as always. Thank you for joining me here. We'll catch up next week.
Sounds good.